Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Welcome back to the Korea Pro Podcast. We're in the studio. It's November 6th on a Thursday. It's a little over 3:30 p.m. today. And I'm joined with Jeongmin, but John's not here.
John's on vacation, but he keeps coming to the office. Stop coming to the office, John.
Well, that's something that can't be helped. And then we're going to start off with Nvidia.
What was the deal, just as a reminder?
Right, so it was 260,000 GPUs, Blackwell GPUs that Nvidia makes to the South Korean government and also its main AI conglomerates, Naver, SK Group, Hyundai Motor, and also Samsung Electronics.
And when Nvidia was announcing the investment, it said the country's total AI GPU capacity will rise from around 65,000 to over 300,000 units under the new Blackwell infrastructure. And this is not confirmed, but there are a lot of local media reports indicating that many of the pledged GPUs include the latest GB200 Grace Blackwell models that Jensen Huang sort of displayed on stage throughout the year. And some RTX 6000 units also mixed in. And about 50,000 of these are expected to be used by Hyundai Motor for autonomous driving and robotics as part of the AI factory initiative. So they really, really need it right now because Hyundai has been lagging behind U.S. and Chinese competitors in that when it comes to that technology. And China, I believe, China wants to aim at 70% of its new cars to be all autonomous by 2035. So it's a very competitive market right now.
But then, of course, the United States President, Mr. Donald Trump, he said quite a number of things about the sale of Nvidia goods.
Yeah, and it actually struck the market pretty bad, stock market pretty bad yesterday and the day before. It was a CBS News interview. It was 60 minutes, but of course he wanted to speak more, so it was 90 minutes interview.
Of course he did.
60-minute program. He basically said the NVIDIA's most advanced chips, which he calls super-duper chips, will be reserved just for American companies. But to be fair, this was in response to a question from the CBS reporter whether or not U.S. is willing to sell those chips, Blackwell chips, that is, to China. So the question itself was very much focused on China. But what really went into headlines in South Korea that day is that Donald Trump mentioned anyone. It won't go to anyone but American countries. So apparently a lot of investors in South Korea were scared looking at that. So the KOSPI, which surged past 4,200 mark for the first time. On Monday, it fell again below that level, and it was led by 5 to 6% drops, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. I'm not sure if it jumped back on today, but the market responded very, very quickly to that.
So what's the sort of repercussions that comes from Trump's remarks then?
So the first thing is basically the one that I already mentioned. The autonomous driving will be hit pretty bad if this is the case, that Trump will limit it just for American companies. But before we move into repercussions, we need to caveat this a little bit. Local media is bumping the sense of crisis a lot. They're calling it potential 불거품, that the deal will be scrapped. I don't think that's the case so far. Nvidia did not announce anything. And they weren't going to sell the Blackwell advanced chips to China anyways.
And also the South Korean government hasn't reacted in the way that the media has.
Yeah, and also like from Trump, it's not like he mentioned allied countries yet. And also like the legal measures are unclear how to prevent a private company from selling. Like China, I get it. There are existing export controls. But other countries, it's just very unclear what kind of measures that can actually take. It could be, driving down subsidies for those chips, which I doubt.
Right.
There are some market-related measures, but it's not at the level of how much South Korean media is concerned right now. Speaking of Donald Trump, there was a very interesting moment during the audit and budget sessions throughout this week. Let's start with the whole nuclear subs issue. By the way, the Defense Minister of South Korea, Ahn Gyu-back, said that he opposes the term 핵잠, which is nuclear-powered submarine. It means the same thing in English.
Exactly.
But he wants 원자력 추진 잠수함, which means nuclear energy propulsion submarine. So when he was explaining that, he said he does not want to give impression to the international community that this is nuclear weapons or it's not for peaceful use. To be fair, is a submarine really for peaceful use? But anyways, he said international reaction, but my guess is this is more about domestic public sentiment because South Korean public tend to respond in a very excited manner when they hear anything about nuclear related
Especially when
things.
you use the word 핵 in front of
Yeah, exactly. So I get that part. But then the interesting part of that Q&A session during, was it the audit?
It was the budget review.
It was
by
a budget
the Defense
review.
Committee of the National Assembly.
Right. It's a budget season right now, and the defense minister, it didn't come out of nowhere. The PPP lawmaker Yoo Yong-won, who's former 조선일보 reporter, he's like a renowned military expert. He asked, it was a leading question, honestly. He said, don't you think that the nuclear submarine should be built autonomously in South Korea? And then how did Ahn respond?
Well, Ahn was, he's been quite reserved on his comments regarding the nuclear-powered submarines, but he did say that South Korea's sort of planned nuclear-powered submarines and approved by Trump should be built domestically in a shipyard in South Korea instead of the Philly shipyard that was proposed by President Trump.
And the way that he explained it is that South Korea already has over 30 years of technology and research experience, and so that he thinks it would be reasonable to be able to build it in South Korea. I'm not sure how the U.S. security officials will feel about this, because the way that expert put it to us is that it's not just about, triumphing American jobs in Philadelphia, like Trump puts it, like from security officials' perspective. This is a very sensitive technology, sensitive fuel as well. So they want some sort of American oversight over the entire design.
Ahn also has a point. So the Philly shipyard does not have the facilities required to build nuclear-powered submarines alone.
It's for commercial vessels so
exactly.
far, right?
So it's a commercial shipyard. It's owned by Hanwha Ocean. Hanwha Ocean does have the logistics and does have the capability to transfer that facility and build that facility within the Philly shipyard. But of course, that will take years in the making. So of course, this is a very long-term project, and not, as we mentioned in the last podcast episode, and as we've been continually sort of mentioning within our analyses, this is not something that will happen immediately within the next months. So this will happen by mid-2030s. That's what security experts are calculating.
And there is not really a formal written agreement yet that is publicized. So it is a bit risky of Ahn to very quickly sort of publicly opposed to the idea, even considering how it was a response to a lawmaker's leading question. But it's something to keep an eye on. And speaking of written agreement, will there be a joint fact sheet?
Well, the presidential office of South Korea keeps on saying that the joint fact sheet, or the presidential chief of staff, Kang Won-sik, he's saying that the joint fact sheet, the release will not go over this week. So it is expected by the end of this week. Of course, the end of this week is tomorrow in terms of sort of weekday propositions. But we still need to make sure whether Mr. Kang's comments will come into the fore.
Speaking of defense, let's talk about space surveillance a little bit. There was a major development earlier this week.
Right. So South Korea successfully launched its fifth and final military reconnaissance satellite, synthetic aperture satellite that was launched on November 2nd from the Cape Canaveral sort of space site. And it's quite a milestone within South Korea's efforts to strengthen its kill chain preemptive strike system against some North Korean nuclear and missile threats. Of course, it is a decade-long initiative. It's part of the Project 425, which is South Korea's plan to put into orbit 5 of its military reconnaissance satellites to better monitor North Korea.
And that is like EOIR satellite, one EOIR satellite and 4 synthetic aperture radar satellites. What are the different applications? What are the different capabilities of these satellites?
Right. So the SAR satellite, the synthetic aperture radar satellite, it allows South Korea to monitor its target in an all-weather condition. So
all-weather high resolution.
Exactly. So, and then the IOER, it supplements that.
Which is electro-optical and flared.
Yeah. And it provides better sort of satellite imagery.
I see. So hang on. So the IOER is for better resolution, and SAR is more frequent?
Yes.
I see.
So altogether, they form a constellation with it, which allows the South Korean administration and also the South Korean defense capabilities to sort of enhance the ISR, so intelligence and surveillance capabilities.
So what's the resolution like? How close can they get?
Right, so each radar satellite will offer a ground resolution of about 730 centimeters. It's quite...
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's quite precise enough to identify sort of North Korean leadership targets, tracking the movement of North Korean tells moving.
So now it's all put into orbit, and when it's like fully operational, what would be the frequency?
Right, so currently at this moment you have 2 hours frequency. So it's... What we need for kill chain is 30 minutes frequency. But of course, with these 5 satellites, there's distance between those satellites.
I see.
That's why you need smaller satellites within the air or in orbit to make sure that the distance between these 5 satellites is not as distant as 2 hours and still shortens that to 30 minutes. That will require about 40 or so smaller or medium-sized satellites that South Korea is currently working on to make sure it goes into orbit by 2040. But of course, at the current moment, 2 hours is not something, it's a 1 hour 30 off the kill chain target.
So far, like before this 425 project, the concern that South Korean military always had was that we have the guns, but we don't have the eyes. So now we have good enough eyes. What did the experts tell you about how this is a game changer or not?
Right, so it is a first step, right? So it's a first step to enhancing South Korea's independent intelligence and surveillance capabilities over North Korea.
Because before it was through information sharing with U.S. and Japan.
Exactly. So it is still very much reliant on U.S. systems. So regardless of space surveillance, which South Korea already sort of relies on U.S. satellites, U.S. military satellites, South Korea also relies on U.S. technologies in its sort of ground-based surveillance and also not orbital, but air surveillance, where you have the global Hawk drone, for example.
We will probably need to touch on this issue next week after, hopefully, the joint fact sheet is out and like more details about the security consultative meeting that happened this week. But how do these satellites change anything when it comes to OPCON transfer requirements?
Right. So OPCON transfer requirement, you have the second. So it's... As we've discussed many times before, it's still under the 2014 conditions-based transfer, which requires which requires 3 options. You know, South Korea's capability of leading a future combined forces command. You have the second option, which is South Korea's capabilities in order to lead operations against North Korean threats, which directly links into South Korea's ISR capabilities and also command capabilities as well, which South Korea is currently working towards improving, but is still very much lacking and reliant on U.S. systems. Along with the SCM this week, there was a meeting between the Joint Chiefs of the U.S. and South Korea, the MCM Military Committee meeting, and also Lee met Hegseth as well, right? Like, what were some of the main things that were discussed? Right, so OPCON transfer was the main headline that came out.
But Lee mentioned it, right?
Also, the Joint Chiefs mentioned it as well.
I see.
So the Joint Chiefs mentioned it during the MCM. The joint statement that came out from both sides was saying that OPCON transfer, all the goals are being met, and they have confidence that they will be met. Of course, they did not give a proposed timeline for when OPCON transfer will be completed, since transfer conditions are still being made. And Lee was meeting with Hegseth after the security consultative meeting between Defense Minister Pete Hegseth, Defense Minister Ahn Gyu-back, and U.S. Secretary of Defense or War Secretary Pete Hegseth. And what he was saying to Hegseth was that OPCON transfer will alleviate, or sort of expediting OPCON transfer will alleviate South Korea's role in the ROK-US sort of deterrence against North Korea.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead, budget season is ongoing. Are there anything in domestic politics that we have to keep an eye on?
Right. So, barring sort of the joint fact sheet, we also have the audits for the presidential office that will be going on. Also, the budget reviews for each ministry will be going on with the National Assembly. It is the end of the year. So, for fiscal year 2026, South Korea has introduced its largest ever budget. It's mostly focused on AI and enhancing South Korea's AI capabilities. But of course, in terms of defense, in terms of, science regulations, that's something to keep an eye on.
And also, we don't really mention or cover this all that much after the Constitutional Court ruling of the former President Yoon's impeachment. But there are a lot of trials going on right now that are being streamed as well. You see a lot of headlines around it. And it will go on. And right now, the Han Deok-soo, the former prime minister one, is going on separately. And the Yoon's one is also going on. Kim Gan-hee one is going on. We're hearing a lot of new testimonies. I hope that they said all these stuff before the impeachment. But now they're just newly saying this. A lot of witnesses and people involved, including how one of the commanders involved testified just yesterday or something that Yoon said something along the lines of bring Han Dong-un to me, then PPP leader, and I could even shoot him myself or something like that.
So it's quite a disturbing element of the Yoon administration, how they went to such extremes to make sure that political opposition, even within his own party, were completely depleted.
And Yoon was sort of saying that he was just joking, that bros joke about killing each other with a gun or something. But so when you're reading headlines about these, it's always better to see the video yourself if you're interested. But anyways, the noise will continue throughout next week.
Indeed.
And this is not next week, but end of month. But on November 27th, the BOK will decide on the base interest rate. And a lot of analysts are expecting that it might actually go down a little bit. And this is technically not next week, but you will start hearing a lot of financial research institutions starting sharing their projections about it. The BOK is expected to announce the new base interest rate on November 27th. And so far, a lot of financial institutions are saying that it's expected to lower the benchmark interest rate from 2.5 to 2.25%, something to keep an eye on.
And all of this information will be sent to your week ahead newsletters by Monday, 2 p.m. So if you want to know more, please subscribe.
Have a good weekend, everybody. We miss you, John. And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.